All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. I'm Jeremy Yohe, Alta's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a great presentation focused on the recent NAR settlement agreement. And there's obviously a lot of interest in this. We've had nearly 900 people register for today's webinar, so thank you for taking a little time and learning a little bit more about the agreement and how it could impact you. Many unknowns remain around the agreement surrounding the broker commissions and how it will impact how homes are bought and sold. So today we will dig into some of the details and discuss key items that you all should understand to prepare for the new potential wave of real estate business models. Before starting, I've always got a few housekeeping items to go over. Today's webinar is being recorded. You'll get an email with a link to the recording tomorrow, and you can always access our webinar recording archive at alta.org/webinars. You can download a PDF of the presentation now from the handout section in the GoToWebinar window pane. The email tomorrow will also have a link to get a copy of the presentation. If at any time you have any questions or comments, submit them in the questions box. We'll try to hold a little time at the end for Q&A. I do need to thank Qualia for sponsoring today's webinar. And before introducing today's speakers, we have a short message from Qualia.
Qualia's digital closing platform is used by thousands of real estate, title, escrow, and mortgage professionals to provide simple, secure buying, selling, and refinance experiences. Whether you're running a closing for a purchase or a refinance, remote or in person, enjoy an easy and consistent process from order opening to post-closing. Qualia innovates alongside you. Together, we can proudly transform and simplify how homes are bought and sold.
All right, thank you for that message, Qualia. The last line kind of caught my attention, changing how homes are bought and sold. So a little bit of the topic today. All right, let me introduce today's speakers. Joining us today, we have Linda Grohovic. Linda is Senior Vice President in the Agency Division for the FNF family of companies. She focuses on helping local title agents grow their footprint. As a licensed realtor for 27 years, Linda has some great insight into the impact the settlement will have on the industry. Also joining us is Mike LaRosa. Mike is an attorney and Chief Operating Officer for Florida Agency Network, which is a conglomerate of title agencies that share back office services and pooled resources. Mike has held management and leadership roles in the settlement services industry since 1999 and joined Florida Agency Network in 2015. Mike and Linda, thank you for joining us. Linda, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. And I look forward to this conversation and to probably a lot of questions too. So before I go into this lawsuit timeline, we're going to talk a little bit about how did this all come about? Because there's a lot of miscommunication out in the field. And not just on the real estate side, but title insurance side and attorneys. I mean, all around financial services on how did we get there and what do we need to do? So back in a little factoid before the very first lawsuit was actually filed, back in June 2018, the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice actually held a joint public workshop in Washington, D.C., and to explore competition issues in the residential real estate brokerage industry. Buying or selling a home has always been, the biggest financial transaction in most consumers' lives, right? And the residential real estate brokerage industry has been, there's been significant changes over the years, including the emergence of all new business models, new technologies. So this workshop back in 2018 focused on those developments and also kind of surrounded a publication that the FTC and the DOJ did back in 2007 regarding competition in the real estate brokerage industry. So the lawsuit didn't start this ball rolling. It was this workshop, and before that, a report on competition back in 2007. And at this public workshop, they discussed all sorts of things: customer-facing platforms, available of listing information to consumers and how accurate it was, regulatory and competitive hurdles that were facing consumers as well as different platforms, the effect of these listing platforms, changes in the traditional real estate models, the way brokerages are done and teams, multiple listing practices, growth of non-traditional fee structures. Things were changing. It wasn't all about a percentage. And then there was obstacles, and they talked about competitive impact and so on and so forth. So that was really I don't want to say the basis, but that's what kind of got the conversations going. So then what happened after that? Well, I'm not going to dig deep into these. I just want you to know about them for the mere fact that this is less about just a couple cases, but dozens of lawsuits, amended lawsuits, settlements, MLSs, local real estate boards of realtors. So the lawsuit timeline, which I will give full credit to Housing Wire, because they've been keeping up really well with all of these lawsuits and the timeline. So we started in March with Morel, class action lawsuit. Then came Spitzer Burnett in April. DOJ simultaneously files a complaint and a settlement with NAR in November. The Naselec case in 2020, Batten 1 in 2021. Next, July 1st, the DOJ withdraws from its proposed settlement agreement with NAR. So they kind of just took it away. January, DOJ just rules that the original settlement terms are still valid and the DOJ has to comply with it. So then again, the DOJ comes back in 2003 and files an appeal of that ruling. Then Naselec in July, parties reach a settlement agreement. In September of 2023, Spitzer, Burnett, and Morel Anywhere reaches a settlement with regards to that case. September again, Spitzer, Burnett, Morel reached an agreement with Remax on the settlement. And October, Naselec, DOJ files a motion that, hey, there are significant concerns about the settlement agreement. Naselec comes back, judge endorses the motion to stay. Then the next day, Halloween of all days, Spitzer Burnett, the Missouri, Kansas City to be exact, jury finds NAR and 2 real estate brokerages liable for collusion to inflate or maintain high commission rates. Same day, class action filed against NAR, several other people. 2 days later, another suit, Batten number 2, which encompasses everybody that Batten 1 didn't file against, but interestingly enough, they didn't mention NAR in that lawsuits. So now we get the copycats that are coming in. So November of 2023, similar class action South Carolina, then New York, then the Texas Association of Realtors. Then in November of 2023, judge grants preliminary approval of that Remax and Anywhere settlement agreements. So as you see, there is stuff going on almost every day during November and December. Similar class action, the news reports like to call them copycats, but they're additional lawsuits, whether they be in Georgia, Texas, Maryland, Real Estate Board of Realtors of New York, Arizona, and then we have a couple of the real estate brokerages file motions for judgment. And then in January of this year, more of these lawsuits are coming in against NAR in particular states. Nevada, 2 more in California, 1 against the Board of Realtors, another one now against the MLS. So next, some more, okay? We get voluntary dismissal of 1 case, Keller Williams in February, an antitrust in February, Spitzer Burnett in February 2024, Home Services America asked the Supreme Court to reverse the lower court ruling. So as you can see, it goes on and on and on. March 15th, Association of Realtors agrees to pay a $413 million to settle the commission lawsuits. And this is the key time in the timeline when we talk about the NAR settlement. In March of 25th, again, judge denies decertification of the class. March 28th, another copycat comes into play. Next, and this is a little bit more towards where we are today and the NAR settlement. So why the NAR settlement? Well, NAR wants to protect everybody that has invested, every Realtors Association that is Realtor owned. And there were some key terms to that settlement. There was a significant amount of release of liability. So no more, not completely, but only the people that are participating in the settlement, no more copycats. Another key issue or key settlement term was the offer of compensation was completely prohibited in the MLS. And we're going to get into a little bit more detail on that. Number 3, written agreements. So just like a seller's realtor or a realtor for the selling, for the seller has to sign a listing agreement, now it's mandatory that an agent who represents the buyer has to sign a buyer brokerage agreement. Now, mind you, these are not federal forms. These are state by state forms. So written agreements for the MLS participants acting for buyers. There's a settlement payment. NAR continues, obviously, to deny any wrongdoing. They're trying to get ahead of all of this. And as of right now, the settlement has not been approved by the judge. So these are proactive things that, or this timeline that NAR is putting into place. And that's what makes this also very important. This is not, NAR wasn't doing a wait and see, you know, on what happens. They're more invested in being proactive and really getting into, you know, satisfying this settlement. So they came up with some dates that they felt that certain actions needed to be required by any of their membership. So June 18th, there was a deadline for the Realtor MLSs, for local associations to chime in or be part of that settlement. And I will say from personal experience and being licensed in a couple different states, there was one particular state that did it very early on and another state that waited to the 9th hour. One does not mean it was a good thing or a bad thing. You have to understand that these large organizations have to go back to their membership and their own individual boards to say, yes, we are going to be part of this. So that was a lot of communication going back and forth for these Realtor MLSs and non-MLSs to either be part of this or not be part of it. Big decision to be made. And then August 17th, which is coming up, right? That is just a few weeks away. And there are a lot of people that don't know what is the significance of this, you know, August 17th date. Well, this is the date that NAR put into place. This is not a DOJ thing. This is not an FTC thing. This is something that NAR put into place that as of that date, you have to do certain things, you know, and one of them is having buyer brokers agreements. Also, the MLSs cannot have any information regarding compensation, nothing. And the DOJ was very specific about this too. There's no workarounds. There's no trying to, hide this percentage or flat fee or whatever it is, encrypt it in the notes. You can't put it on social media. You can't put it on your website. There cannot be any means of communicating compensation through the MLSs at all. And everybody had to implement this before August 17th. Now, there are several boards around the country that are implementing this a little earlier, just so their realtors can get a feel for it online. So in September, that's when there's the anticipated motion in support of the final approval. And then that September 16th is the deadline for realtor MLSs opting in or opting out of all of these practical changes, as well as being released party under that settlement agreement. And then November 26th is a hearing for final approval. Now, some of those dates may change, but all the finalization will hopefully be done by the end of this year. Next. All right, so a couple things that I want to try to make very clear. And it's hard to make clear because there is a lot of miscommunication going out there. Have there been any unintended consequences? Well, there has, just by virtue of that miscommunication. A lot of questions about, should I be getting out of the business as a realtor? This is craziness. I'm not used to doing this. I don't like change. I have been a real estate agent for 27 years and I've never gotten into trouble. I like to do it the old-fashioned way that has been done for 100 years. And Mike, I know that you've heard that in the field too.
There's no doubt. And I think ultimately the best realtors are going to be fine. And in fact, there's opportunity in chaos. I do believe that. I think there's going to be an obvious shift towards, a listing driven market nationally. I don't think there's any question about that. From our standpoint as title agents, and we have a lot of close relationships with some large brokerages, I feel like the trend towards mega real estate teams is on the horizon. And I think that real estate brokerages are going to have to provide value and show value. And I'm at a point right now where I feel like the better teams, the bigger teams, the ones that can afford it, I think that there's going to be a component of buyer representation potentially included in these offerings where, you've got these mega teams, and if someone traditionally represented buyer only, they may have to adjust and start learning the listing side of the business. But I think that they're going to have buyer representation as part of that. And like you said, Linda, as of August 17th, the rules change. How they're going to compensate one another. I mean, everything's going to be negotiable. And I wonder if a component of what was traditionally a listing brokerage may now incorporate some of that buyer side representation. And if I allow myself to kind of go down that rabbit hole, and we'll get into it a little bit more later in the presentation, but I'm wondering what types of options are going to become available now, especially on the buyer representation side. I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that, if lenders are getting more interested in driving or directing title, is there some possible component where they're offering buyer rep services, or maybe flat fee services, or even, I could see a world where if we're serious about saving consumers money, are there opportunities for them to lump those fees into the loan financing and save out-of-pocket money for a potential home buyer? So right. We'll know more soon, but things are going to change, rest assured.
Right. And, as of right now, for a lender to change their underwriting standards, it doesn't happen overnight. So, nope. That's not going to be a big component starting August 17th. But I will say, to your point, realtors need to, have good skills in communicating, understanding what's going on, and negotiation. I mean, that has always been a key factor with any realtor, is having those negotiation skills. Now, you had mentioned that everything is going to be negotiable now. Well, it was already negotiable then.
That's true.
Okay, everything was negotiable. However, maybe the consumer didn't realize it was negotiable, or maybe the seller's agent or buyer's agent didn't provide the full picture to the consumer on how it was negotiable. So that conversation has to change. There has to be clear, concise information that's going out. The quote that I really like is, disruption only happens to the unprepared. So, and that is with any industry, all right? Let me give you a little synopsis of how the practice changes, or what the practical changes are going to be. So it's going to require that the MLS to eliminate all broker compensation, which I mentioned, and compensation information at all in MLSs. They're going to eliminate and prohibit MLS participants, subscribers, and sellers from making any offers of compensation on the MLS. They're going to require that the MLS not create, not facilitate, or even support any non-MLS platform or mechanism to even get that information. All right, so when I said before that the DOJ was serious about no workarounds, they're serious about no workarounds. Prohibit the use of MLS data in any data field, directly or indirectly establish or maintain the platform to offer compensation. And then require that the MLS participants working with a buyer to enter into a written agreement with the buyer prior to even showing a property. Now, of course, realtors, both on the selling side and on the buying side, they always talk to these potential buyers beforehand. What many realtors always did is making sure that they were pre-qualified with the lender before going into that house, right? So now they're going to have a written document with the buyer in order to get into that first house. Now, I will say that there is going to be a field that is being allowed called concession. Now, a lot of MLSs already had that word concession or that field in their MLSs, but it was post-closing, meaning their house sold for $300,000 and the seller concession was $10,000 because all the carpeting needed to be replaced and that was negotiated. Well, now this concession field can be active during the listing. Now, this is not a workaround. This is not a replacement for, in concessions, seller willing to offer blah, blah, blah percent. It's either a yes or a no or information. So the key thing, if that MLS participates in that, is for the realtor to see that yes, there may be seller concessions, or no, there may not be seller concessions. So that will be a very good indication to that realtor, okay, things are negotiable. May not be commission because concession doesn't mean commission, but it could be a host of other things. We're going to give a $5,000 allowance for new appliances, or we are in the contract, we will offer compensation. So that is a key thing that realtors need to know from their local MLSs. Is this going to be there? Is this going to be an optional field that I get to use? And like I said, all the MLSs, all the local boards have had session after session, education after education, and it's a matter of us realtors actually participating in those. And in some of these, we kind of did a couple of these unintended consequences already, and we're going to go a little bit more into detail later. So we're going to go to the next slide. Impact on MLSs. Number one, they got to be ready by August 17th. Hands down, DOJ is going to be watching this very closely. Local MLSs had to make a decision. They've had to be part of this settlement or not. They've had to communicate that and educate their realtors, and hopefully they're doing it. There was a lot of communication or speculation that, oh, this is going to, X amount of percentage of realtors are going to drop out of, being buyers agents. But frankly, disruption is an opportunity. For me, if there are some people, let's say I'm a realtor, if there are a lot of people in my marketplace that just, their hair is on fire and they don't think that they're going to be able to do this extra little paperwork and explanation to their consumer client, well, I'm going to jump in and say, you know what? I'm going to help you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer. I'm going to tell you exactly what this is and what this agreement is supposed to be. Next slide, please. What the buyer should keep in mind. Number one, I just want you to know that we've already included in your handouts, or at least Jeremy can confirm this, that there are resources at facts.realtor, because realtor is a domain, facts.realtor, and we provided some of those resources for you because we could do this for 3 hours today and there's not enough time. But there's a great handout that NAR put together regarding settlement facts. What a great thing for our title industry to be able to help our realtor clients get them through this and be a true partner with them. There's a great guide for home sellers that we've attached. There's a great guide for home buyers that have been attached. And some of these items are talked about in there. Is there a broker agreement and what are the terms? Well, number one, yeah, there's going to be new forms, but it's state by state. In there, the terms are going to be, hey, Mr. Buyer, hey, Mr. Buyer's realtor, this is what I'm going to be paid from the buyer in order to represent you in this transaction. It could be a percentage, it could be a flat fee, maybe even something tiered. Mm-hmm. I heard this from a not a local group, but a large group outside of the Midwest, that they're thinking of a tiered rate, because sometimes realtors, and I know this is going to be shocking, but sometimes realtors work with one buyer for years, showing them hundreds of homes. And then there's some of them that are able to find that buyer a home right away. So there are groups that are thinking, well, maybe this is more menu driven. Get compensated if I work with a buyer for 6 months versus 12 months versus 2 years, or a flat fee. Now, here's the thing, a buyer has to make sure, and the buyer's realtor has to explain this to them, that if a seller doesn't provide a concession, you are on the hook to paying that realtor, whatever that percentage is. Let's just pretend it's 2%, okay? Here's the other indication. Let's say the buyer-broker agreement has all the terms in it. The buyer's realtor went through that, full disclosure, talked about negotiation, how they're going to do this. If the seller was willing to provide a concession, and you find this out during contract negotiation, or maybe the realtor calls the listing realtor and asks, let's say the seller was willing to give 2.5%. Well, the buyer's broker agreement says 2. That's all that buyer broker will be paid. Mm-hmm. So there's no double dipping in this either. All right. So these are all things that, a realtor needs to know. Is it items that we need to know as title professionals? Well, yes, because there are a lot of title companies that, as their typical workflow, they request prior to closing a broker statement. 1. Guess what? Now we should probably ask for 2. We should reach out to the listing agent and get their broker statement and reach out to the buyer's agent to get their broker statement. Let's make sure they match. Then we'll know if there was a concession. Then the title agent will know, does it come out of the seller's side or is it coming out of the borrower's bottom line? Can buyer finance charges with lender? Right now, that is up to the lender, and there is no hard or fast rule. If a buyer was going to put down 10%, let's say $20,000 is 10%, and their buyer broker compensation was going to be $10,000, the buyer has to understand that he or she has to pay that. Seller may not have a concession. Maybe they will not have $20,000 down, but now $10,000 down. And these are all things that a good realtor is going to be talking about. Just like on the seller side, we're really good realtors and great real estate companies explained that net seller sheet. If we get this, this is your bottom line. If we get that, this is going to be your bottom line. It's going to now be the same thing on the buyer side. So if I was a realtor right now full-time, which I'm not, I would probably maybe even put together a buyer's net sheet. So, and these are all great conversations that that companies should have. Can we get involved as, title agents? That is up to you. It is up to your relationship with your clients who are realtors. Potential buyer savings tied to changes in the commission structure. I'm going to take, I don't have a crystal ball. Anything that I say is not going to be what F&F, endorses or anything. This is just my thought. I really don't see a bunch of savings in the front end. Buyers want to be represented by realtors, and they're going to find a way. And great realtors are going to negotiate however they can to, number one, be paid what their value is. Same thing on the seller side. Where there be possibly some, percentage changes? I don't know. Maybe there might be people that want to capitalize on this and maybe charge less or maybe charge more. I don't know. What do you see out there, Mike?
Well, I 100% agree with you that whether it's going to be variable pricing or flat rate or lenders and iBuyers creating their own programs with, use our companies and we offer a reduced rate package. I think it's going to evolve quickly. Yes. What I'm concerned about, and you kind of hit on, I don't want this to be a race to the bottom.
Right.
The whole point of this is housing affordability, and the people that need that the most, first-time home buyers, more economically challenged buyers, are probably the ones who need the best representation. And what I don't want to see happen is, you get what you pay for, and these reduced rate models providing less representation than these buyers really need. When I think about commissions, I really do hope that there's some give there for these buyers. I'm not saying good realtors shouldn't get paid. They absolutely should, and they're going to be working harder now than they did in the past. What I mean is, like in a $400,000 example, every percent is $4,000. So if you've already got $12,000 built in on the listing side, and you're looking for a buyer to potentially come out of pocket an additional $12,000 or not, I mean, there's your obvious potential saving. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And I'll give you an example. My son buying a home, first-time home buyer, buying a condo in Chicago. Condos in Chicago aren't cheap. 1% could mean, $6,000. He doesn't have a spare $6,000. Now, for the second-time home buyer, the third-time home buyer, the impact may not be felt because of all the equity they have and the cash they're willing to put down. But when you're looking at high interest rates, low money down, and high housing costs, you've got your trifecta of things that are not working in his favor right
That
now.
combo. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I think things are going to be, you mentioned this, I think what is going to be provided in representation is going to be stated much more clearly.
Yes.
Whether people are reading that or not, they certainly should. I do believe there's an opportunity here for some of those better realtors and brokerages to, offer a boutique, for lack of a better term, experience, and potentially go from charging 3 to 4, 4.5, whatever, knowing that they may be addressing some of what traditionally may have been handled on the buy side, depending if they're dual representation or what have you. But I think there's going to be an opportunity here for the best realtors to capitalize.
And I'm going to add to that. It may not be just the best, but the ones that really understand what's going on and their value and communicating their value. Because just like in the lending industry, it's value-based. When it comes to the title industry, utilizing a title agent and utilizing or having title policies is important. Just the same fact in the real estate sphere, real estate agents are key. They know their market. They know what's valuable. They know what can drive prices up or down. And then literally just the advantage of having someone else negotiate on your behalf.
It's true.
Because then it takes the emotion out of it. So I go buy a house, I love it. How am I going to be? I'm not going to be flexible. I want this house. And your buyer broker is going to be the one to be able to negotiate everything for you. So I agree. The best, the brightest, and the most educated in this sphere is going to really be successful. Next,
Great.
please. How will brokers get paid? Well, you know what? They're going to be paid exactly how they were before at the closing. It's just going to depend. Is it on the seller side column or on the buyer side column? And I'm probably doing it the wrong direction on video, and that's where the title agent has to know, all right, is there a concession or is there not a concession? Is the buyer paying the buyer's broker, or is the seller providing a concession to the buyer's broker? Internally, how they get their percentages and all that, that's not going to change, and that's all individually based. And this is why I put this one in writing. It's a suggestion, and I think it's a pretty good one, is asking for broker statements from both sides of the transaction. Next.
And real quick, Linda, I had a few questions on how these fees will be disclosed on the loan estimate, and then if it's negotiated and changes, how's that reflected on the closing disclosure?
Well, and that's a great question. We don't know how the lenders are going to put it on the loan estimate.
That's right.
That's their form. The lender, now, communication again, the buyer should be communicating with the lender. The buyer typically already has the house. Well, they have to have the house or at least the contract in to get the loan estimate. So the buyer will be able to communicate with the lender if they are paying that buyer broker or not. Now, for a pre-qualification, there's nothing with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that the main question, Jeremy?
Yep. Thank you.
Mike, I'm going to let you
Consolidation. Yes.
Here.
Well, I'm definitely expecting consolidation, not only in the real estate space, but also in the title space. I think that, there's just so much regulation, insurance, cyber concerns. We're all changing the way we do business as of August 17th. There's a lot of new variables that are kind of playing into my thought that the smaller real estate brokerages and title companies are going to struggle a bit to survive unless they're willing to sort of adapt and evolve more quickly maybe than their competitors. I think that more traditional brokerages are going to give way to more of the tech forward approaches and models. I mean, somewhere there's going to have to be efficiencies to make up for shrinking margins, let's just call it. I do expect the mega teams to proliferate. I think that's going to become a trend. Shared resources, possibly shared compensation, again, to address those shrinking margins. So yeah, consolidation, I think, is going to be a pretty significant component of the change. And then does it change how title companies are going to get business? Well, for me, this is the $1 million question, and I believe it's to be determined, as a lot of this is evolving, as we've said, 10 times already. But yes, it is going to change the way we get business. I think that if more and more buyers are going with no or less representation, we may have to focus more of our marketing on the lenders themselves directly, and these listing brokerages and teams specifically. I think that we're going to have to help educate them, especially at the beginning. And I think that there's value in knowledge. So I'm hopeful that that is going to be one of our approaches. Linda, I know it's almost nonsensical, but a more consumer driven, more consumer direct marketing approach. And we've talked about this in the title industry before, but very few consumers know about, or certainly don't care much about selecting title. That wasn't something germane to the home buying process in the past. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. Is there going to be a real push for sale by owners and reaching those consumers directly? I think that has to be a component of it, but I don't know how successful that would be. In the past, they've been a difficult market for us to reach.
I 100% agree. And Jeremy knows this is why he's smiling. It has been my mission in my title career to educate the consumer directly. Like, one day before I'm gone, I want to see, something related to title insurance on Super Bowl Sunday. I want to see somebody's logo, some title company up there, because then you made it, right? But
No doubt.
the consumer, this is why realtors are so important. They're the first eyes on these consumers, the seller side or buyer side, and they become their trusted, liaison for this transaction. So yes, I wish it was more consumer driven. This is why Alta put together the homeowner outreach program, because of this. Consumers need to know this information. Do they want it? Yes, they do, but they want it on their terms. They don't want it at the closing table. They want it, in the middle of the night when they're scrolling on their iPad when they can't sleep, saying, we're going to buy our first house tomorrow. And the realtor is not their first phone call anymore. It is the internet. So
and this younger purchasing community, they're not intimidated by the online research. The Gen Zers, these younger buyers. So that part of it. So there's hope there. And if anyone was ever going to be underrepresented by a professional, I mean, at least this group, they have the tools to find the information if they care to online. I can tell you as a title agency, I also feel like I need to educate and bring value. And I do wonder if there'll be any kind of trend or push towards title agents having attorneys on staff. And this is a fine line. I got to be careful here, because if sellers are represented and buyers are under or not represented, questions are going to come up. I mean, you have to expect, especially unrepresented, you've got to expect delays. You've got to expect issues are going to pop up that you maybe hadn't in the past, and contract questions. Do we have someone there to provide some guidance without crossing the line into the unauthorized practice of law?
right.
It's, I just think we're going to have to bring value and educate people. And that may be an opportunity to set myself apart as well. So, we're open to whatever we can provide legally.
And that's a really good point, because there are some states where it is traditional, where buyers have their attorney at the closing table, and sellers have their attorney at the closing table. You know, and that's a state that I grew up in, even when I was a paralegal for several years. So to me, having attorneys involved in a real estate transaction is normal. I would never do anything without it, because as a realtor, I can't explain a form. I can't advise somebody to sign a form or not. All I could do is fill in the blanks. You know, and the same thing with a title agent or a non-attorney. You can't explain forms. You could just say, this is what it is, sign here. If you have any questions, go to your lender. But what happens to those seller's documents sitting in the middle of the table? Who's going to explain those? Who's going to review that legal description? No, I'm with you on that one.
I want to jump in real quick. I know we only actually have like less than 15 minutes to go. We have a few more slides, a lot of great conversation. And so if we don't get to your question, contact information for the speakers on the last slide, so please reach out to them directly. A couple of questions actually about staffing real quick. And one question from Kyle, thoughts on title companies having realtors on staff that can assist buyers on an a la carte basis? Interesting. I don't know if that's, you know, something to chew on or consider. And then also, do you think we will see more attorneys providing representation, including contract prep, at a fraction of the price of traditional commission? So
I think we have to expect that. I think there always is a cottage industry that pops out of every opportunity, and you know, like I said earlier, I just hope it's not a race to the bottom. It would be a disservice to the buying community to say, here's a one size fits all, you're represented package for a flat fee of $450. I mean, I don't see how that benefits a home buyer or the process. But if they're going to get real representation at a reasonable cost, I mean, it's everything's negotiable.
Yeah, right. And then one more question about that representation from Celia. If you provide information on a legal question, how do you remain a neutral third party? That's
the problem.
Right. And that's where dual agency comes in too, because if a buyer is not represented, goes into an open house without their agent or no buyer broker agreement, you know, that seller's listing agent, you know, they have a fiduciary duty to their seller and their seller only. So,
and to Linda's point, your point, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and there are a lot of real estate companies that do not do dual agency because they know they cannot represent both sides and really have a fiduciary duty or comply with that, having both sides.
That's always been so difficult a line to walk, and this is going to make it more challenging. But to your point earlier, even if you have the attorney on staff, I mean, we're talking about assistance with, here's where you fill it out, here's what this form is, but whether or not it applies to you or how you have to interpret it, that's legal advice. So it's going to be tricky. We just have to educate them, and part of that education might be go talk to your lender, go talk to an attorney outside of title. Anyway, we don't want the cost to escalate, but you got to be represented. It's a huge purchase.
Right.
Is it another form to say, I am not providing you legal advice to this matter?
Well, but then there's another form that somebody might not read, you know, that
sure.
that should be in the conversation. And I think, you know, I will say most, and I'll go on a limb, but most realtors do say that to their clients. They're upfront. I'm a real estate professional. Here are the attorneys that I may recommend to you.
Yeah.
On the next slide, you know, how will consumers select their realtors?
I think it's going to be pretty much the same as they always have. They're going to look at recommendations. They're going to call their moms or their dads or their uncles or family member. Who did you utilize as a real estate agent? However, and that's more on the seller side. On the buyer side, that's going to be tricky. Do buyers really even know to ask that question yet? And that's where, you know, title agencies, lenders, realtors, everybody should be saying, hey, raise your hand, ask the question.
Yep. And I think there's going to be a lot more in the marketplace suggesting that they certainly should be involved in that decision. And I think those, like we said earlier, the tech platforms, the iBuyers, maybe even lender-driven products, they're going to favor potentially buyers, doing a lot of the legwork themselves. But again, we're going to have to see how this plays out. I think the market will meet the need. We're just going to have to see what that need truly is.
Right. But still, the main points are no compensation on the MLSs.
Yep.
No workarounds for it.
No.
Mandatory buyer broker agreements, and negotiate outside of the public, meaning in your contract. Everything else, you're right. Opportunity, pivoting, there are all sorts of things that are going to happen. Could happen.
Yep.
All right, Mike, what do you think about this one?
I think there's going to be some similar situation here. I think that, you're going to get more education in the marketplace, certainly suggesting that, again, these buyers have got a lot on their plate. Selecting a good realtor, selecting title. Do I believe that every buyer is going to care about title? I wish they did, but I don't think that's the case. I think that there's going to be more information out there. We talked a little bit about it. I believe this generation is uniquely qualified to do this research. I don't think they're intimidated about going online. I don't think they're intimidated about learning the process. And I do think consumer direct marketing is going to hopefully matter here. But I think more than ever, especially if buyers are going to go this alone, they need to pick really strong, well-educated realtor and title as well. I mean, I really think that title is going to have to step up and provide value as well, and education as well. So my hope is, yeah.
100%, definitely. And I would really, because this is locally driven, there are no federal forms, all right?
Right.
If a title agent works in a particular geographic area, I would raise my hand to the local board of realtors or the local MLSs and say, hey, will you allow me in your webinar? Can I get familiar with your forms or your process so that I can educate our own staff to know what to look for?
Yeah.
So see if you could become educated, because a lot of people have asked, oh, can you do a webinar for these realtors and things like that? And the answer is yes, but why? They should be getting this education from their local MLSs. Now, granted, I'm always willing, but the problem is I don't know the local forms. I don't know the local process. I don't know if those forms have been vetted. So it's hard to help them right now, except for gaining knowledge of what to look, what these forms look like.
I agree. It's a good point.
And this really just sails right into, alta.org/homebuyer, because this is where the, homeowner outreach program materials are all there for for title agents to share. If you're a member of Alta, you have access to Alta prints and, it's Canva now, to get all of these items to be able to, for at least your realtor to have some extra information, or you providing this information to a direct consumer. These are your choices. And there are several pieces here in this HOP library that also provides the benefits of using a realtor. So now it's even more important to have those pieces ready to provide the consumer as well.
Yeah, Linda, the Hot Work Group has created more than 100 resources, handouts, documents that members can utilize to educate and market to realtors or directly to the consumers, as you said. And on the screen are just two examples. And the group recently translated some of the most popular items to 12 different languages, including Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic, just to name a couple. And then they've even gone even further beyond the education about item insurance, but also extra documents of like what to expect at closing, what happens after the closing, how to file a claim, what happens after you pay your mortgage. So just a litany of educational content that's available to members, and Linda, you mentioned Canva, that members can actually then brand with their information, their logo, and so, you know, great visibility for your title company. Alta.org/hop is where that's all at. And then, you know, Mike also mentioned, you know, when he was talking about consumers selecting a title company, yes, they've always had that ability to choose. And Alta, since 2008, 2009, has had a consumer-facing education website called homeclosing101.org. And historically, the top 3 visited pages are closing costs explained, what to expect at closing, and find a title company. So there is an appetite for consumers to find a title company to work with. So, and that's
and those 3 as a title company, I would give to my realtor so that the realtor can answer those questions.
Point. Yep.
Because we want these professionals to be inside the transaction. We want title companies in the transaction. We want, you know, realtors in the transaction. We want attorneys in the transaction, because this is the biggest financial obligation that anybody has, and for the next 30 years, right?
Yeah. Jeremy, I know we're down to just a couple minutes, and on the answer to this, do we expect to see more affiliated business arrangement, joint venture title agencies with real estate brokerages? And the answer to that certainly is yes. From my perspective, the call volume has increased dramatically within the last few months. And I think it's logical. I mean, you have forward-thinking real estate brokerages that are trying to get ahead of what they anticipate to be shrinking margins on the commission side, and that makes sense. I think that, you know, if you have an affiliate business arrangement in a state where it was traditionally buyer-directed title, you're going to have to rethink how that is going to shape up. You're going to need to partner up with some listing side brokers to still be viable. But I think also it's not just about the ancillary revenue stream with title JVs. I think that brokerages are being told, you know, ancillary income is going to be needed. I think you're going to see it in title, mortgage, P&C, property management. I think all of those are going to become more popular. And, you know, I think that's kind of a practical result of what's to follow with the commissions and the potential revenue shrinking.
It'll be interesting to see, you know, as this evolves, you know, how the business models will adapt to, you know, as you said, chaos, but opportunity, always opportunity as things change. We do have, we have a few minutes, so for Q&A, there's contact information to both Linda and Mike. Again, great information. Thanks, Linda and Mike, for joining us today. You know,
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And just a reminder, facts.realtor has a lot of great information too. So even though this may not, you know, in the front end directly affect a title agent, but you having this knowledge will help you once things start rolling in.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things to consider going forward. You know, relationships, staffing. We've got a few more questions on disclosure of fees. You know, does the settlement address fees that are being charged to buyers and sellers in addition to the commission question? You know, such as broker administration, processing, electronic storage of document fees. Guess that's not part of the question. Sorry, that's a very long. Sorry, Tim, if I'm butchering that up. So anyway, does the settlement address fees that are being charged to the buyers and sellers in addition to the commission? So should other fees be reflected on this?
Well, that's a really great question, and that's what a broker statement should itemize, and then one charge, all of that be put on the settlement statement typically. So again, a really good reason why you should ask for a seller's broker statement and a buyer's broker's
Yeah.
statement.
It makes good sense. Subledger out all that stuff, technology fees, all of that. Yeah.
All right, well, it's kind of out of time. We had a few questions about the impact of FSBOs, how a realtor will handle open houses, and if they have to have, you know, each person coming in sign an agreement. All great questions. Sorry if we didn't get to all of them. We have a lot.
Yeah, and that question is really going to depend on the local real estate company,
Custom.
because they may have a, you know, what their rules and regs are for that situation.
Yep.
Yeah, and we'll wrap up here. Sorry, someone asked about the 3 top visited sites on Home Closing 101. It's closing costs explained, what to expect at closing, and find a title company. So,
Those are
all
good
right,
ones.
just we'll wrap. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, those are good ones. That's what you want people to look for.
Hmm.
It is. Who would have thought? You know, people are going to reach out to title companies. Love it.
Nice.
Yay.
All right. The resources Linda also mentioned from NAR, will include links in the email tomorrow. So, you know, you don't remember the URL, we'll deliver that to you. If you missed parts of today's webinar, or if you think others in your office would benefit from listening, as I mentioned, it is recorded. You'll get a link to it tomorrow. You can always go to alta.org/webinars to access our webinar archive. I need to thank Qualia once again for sponsoring today's webinar. Linda and Mike, once again, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts on the NAR settlement.
Thank you.
As we've discussed, there's a lot to be seen on how this all plays out, but definitely good to be thinking about it, talking about it, and, you know, developing your strategy going forward.
Absolutely.
Great,
Thanks,
thank
everybody.
you.
All right, that brings us to the conclusion of today's presentation. Take care, everyone.
Bye.